Hello and welcome to the third video in this series for beginners learning to program Python 3. So this video we're going to look at operators, and we're going to look at a couple of new variable types. We're going to be dealing with numbers for the first time in this video. A quick look in the documentation, and we've got inside the built-in types section of the documentation something called numeric types, and that's what we're going to be looking at. There are three numeric types in Python: int, float and complex. I'm going to completely ignore complex and focus on integers, so whole numbers, and floating point numbers, which are numbers with a decimal point. Along with these numeric types, we have a lot of operations that can be performed with them, and we see those in this table here. And I want to demonstrate some of those in this video, and then build a little calculator program, which will be very, very basic because we haven't done much yet. But anyway, we can already make some kind of rough and ready calculator to calculate or make operations on numbers for whatever numbers the user inputs. Before we go to writing a script, however, I'd like to actually start very quickly in the Python interpreter to demonstrate a couple of things. So in the console, I'm going to type Python, and here we are inside the interpreter. I'm going to declare a num1 and make that equal to 16, and a num2 and make that equal to... make it equal to 3. The first thing I want to do is just have a very quick look at what num1 is, and we see it's 16, and if we look at its type, we can see it's an integer, and we'll have the same thing also for num2. They're both integers. If I redeclare num1 now and make it equal to 16.0, its type now will have changed. It's now a floating point number. And with numbers, I can make these operations that I saw in the documentation. So I'm going to make num1 back to just 16 and make sure it's an integer again here. Just check the value of num2, which is 3. And now let's make the first most horrifically complicated operation. Let's use the plus. And I'm sure you can guess what we get. If we do num1 plus num2, we get 19. Let's store the result of num1 plus num2 in a variable. And obviously our variable is 19. And the type of our result, as expected, is 19. If I change the type of num2, and instead of making it 3, make it 3.0, so that the type of num2 is now a float, and then I do the summing operation. I'm now summing an integer and a float. So if I look at the result, you'll see I've now got a decimal point, so I've got a type that is a floating point number. So even though my result could be an integer, because I don't have anything after the decimal place, when I've combined an operation float and integer, Python will always take what's known as the widest type and assign that type to the result that's coming. And you can see that written somewhere, I think, in the documentation here. Here we are. Operand with the narrower type is widened to that of the other. What I can do with my float, however, I can cast that back to an integer. If I put an int now around result, I now get the result 19. It's been cast back into integer, and its type now is of integer. If I just type and then int and result, you can see that it gives me an integer. Now if I redeclare num1 now to be, let's say 19.7, then you'll fully correctly hopefully expect that to have the type of float. Let me now reassign the variable num1, and let me make it an int from num1. So let's cast 19.7 to an int. And the value of num1 now is 19. I've lost all of the value after the decimal point. And it's just something to bear in mind when you're combining floats and integers, that you make sure that whatever operation you do maintains the accuracy to the numbers that you're using. So going back to looking at the operators, I'll just redefine num1 as 16 and num2 as 3. And very quickly, I want to just have a look at a couple of the operators because it's going to be fairly obvious what's going on. I think we've already done the num1 plus the num1 plus the num2 to give us 19. Minus, obviously, we'll do. I'm not going to insult your intelligence by doing the minus. I guess you can figure out what the minus does. The interesting one is with the divide and the multiply, just because of types. So if I say that result is equal to num1 multiplied by num2, and I look at the type of my result, it's still an integer, and the result itself is 48, 16 times 3. If I look at a division, and first of all, my result is 5.3 reoccurring, and clearly you'll be expecting now that to be of a float type. Interestingly, if I say that my result is equal to 8 divided by 4, then the result here is 2. but I've got 2.0. Any result of a division will give you a floating point type, and it's useful to remember that. Two more operations that are often a little bit more tricky to understand, however, are the module and the floored quotient. So let's have a look at saying the result is 8 modulo 3. We get an integer back and we get 2. And what this is simply the remainder. So 2 3s are 6, so 8 modulo 3. 3 goes twice into 8, and there's a remainder of 2. That wasn't the best example because of the 2 and the 2, but let's do 11 modulo 3, and we get 2 again. The remainder is 2. 3 3s are 9, and then there's a remainder is 2. Where modulo can be tricky is if we do something like this, where I say the modulo of 3 modulo 7, so the result of 3 modulo 7. And what I get here is 3, and you might be expecting 4 maybe, or something else other than 3. Well, 3 modulo 7 is actually what's called the floor of the division, so in this case it's 0, and then the remainder, which is 3. If we have a look at the floored quotient then, and this time I'll take 11 / for floored quotient, and then 3, what we get is 3, because it divides 11 by 3, and then rounds the number down to the nearest whole integer. And if I do that with our horrible 3 and 7 example, then I get 0, again rounding down. And these are the main operators, certainly for now, that you'll come across inside Python. So I'd like to exit the Python interpreter, clear the screen, and with CD you can see that I'm in a directory where my folder's called ch3_calc, and if I just type dir, I've got a new file called ch3_calc.py, and I'm all ready to go. I've got Notepad open here, and I've written already calculator at the top. Now I've written something at the top here that we haven't seen before. I've preceded a line here with the hash, and if I just make print, which we're used to now, and hello here, and then run this program, I get hello. So why is it ignored line number 1? Well, line number 1 is what's known as a comment with the hash character here. I'm saying please ignore everything that's written on this line, and this is good because it allows me to write little descriptions during my code of what I'm intending to do. So let's get on and write our calculator. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write a line saying print welcome to this calculator, and then press enter to continue. And right as the last thing, I'm just going to put done so we know that everything's over. So if I run this program, it says welcome to this calculator, press enter to continue. Now in the last video we saved the result of input in a variable and then used this variable. We can also not bother saving what comes back from input, but just make a call to the input function so that the console waits for some user input, and when we hit enter the input is then finished, and it has the effect of waiting for us to press the enter key before the program continues. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask the user to enter a first number and enter a second number. Now we know from the last video that the type of these numbers that have been entered here will be strings, but when we want to perform our operation, these numbers need to be integers. And you remember from when I showed you just now in the interpreter that we can do casting for the types. Well, I'd like to cast these two strings as integers. So just to demonstrate the types there, just so we can make sure they are indeed strings, I'm going to print the type of num1 text, and I'll print the type of num2 text as well, and then do done. So let's run the program, enter to continue, enter the first number 2, the second number 4, and you can see that both of those are strings. Well, that's not what we want. To be able to make our operations, we want them to be integer types, so we need to convert them. So just like we did in the interpreter earlier, we're going to make two new variables, and we're going to cast in turn num1 text and num2 text into num1 and num2. And now what remains is to press enter to run the calculation. One thing I can do for safety's sake is just print the type of num1 and num2 so we can double check that they're integers. We'll save this. I'm going to make some space down the bottom of the script. And now I'm going to run the program just quickly to check everything's working okay. So enter to continue, I'll enter 4 and 7. And we can see that we've got the two string classes, and now I'll press enter to run the calculation, and indeed we've converted our numbers to integer and integer respectively, so we're ready to make our calculations. So I'm going to paste the code in that does this so you don't see me typing out forever, but below here, the multiplication number result, the division number result, the addition, the subtraction, the modulo, and the floor quotient division as well here for num1 and num2, using all of the operators that we looked at inside the Python interpreter. And now we've done our calculations of the two numbers entered, the only thing remaining then is to print out the results of this calculation. So I've pasted in the first line here, where I want to print the string of num1 multiplied by the string of num2 is equal to, and then the string of the number multiplied. So this was our multiplication. So let's just run this and check it's running okay. So I'll enter 10, and I'll enter 7, press enter to run calculation, and you can see we get 10 times 7 equals 70. And let's just paste in the other lines there for the other operations. And with that pasted in then, we can now print the results of all our calculations to the page. So I can save that script. Just to clear the screen, run the script again, press enter to continue, enter our first number, I'll enter 45, and the second number can be 17. Press enter to run the calculation, and now our calculator gives us 45 times 17 divided by 17 plus 17 minus 17 modulo 17 and floored quotient of 17 as well, and then we're all done. So there you go, a couple of videos in, and we've got a calculator working up on the screen, making some various operations on what the user's input is. Of course, in the future you'll see that we can write this script in a much more efficient way with much less code and far fewer print statements. But for now, hopefully that gives you an idea of how the main operators work, that we've got integer types, that we've got float types, as well as our string types. And in fact, for quite a while, those will cover most of the types that you'll need to use in Python to make fairly good, productive programs already. So thanks very much for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.